Man, am I so happy to finally get this review out to all of you. If you've seen some of my other reviews, you probably know that I love the Final Fantasy franchise, having been introduced to the franchise through the newer games like the Final Fantasy VII Remake project and Final Fantasy XVI. So in turn, I've been backtracking to play some of the older games as well, and I've found myself here. Final Fantasy IX is a game that I've heard so much about, with there being quite a bit of anticipation about a remake, although that still remains to be seen. But anyway, let's talk about what's currently out. Final Fantasy IX released in Japan back on July 7th, 2000, later being released in North America in November later that year, and finally being released in Europe in February 2001, eventually finding its way to PC in 2016, and now I'm reviewing it all these years later. But before I continue, please consider subscribing, I would greatly appreciate it. So where was I? Oh, right, I wanted to go through the cast, and who better to start with than Zidane, who is our protagonist. He's a Tantalus member, which is a travelling group of thieves that appear as performers so they can carry out their jobs. Zidane is quite an interesting protagonist. He wants to protect everyone but almost loses himself in the process. Seeing his development throughout the game, particularly towards the end, was amazing. It felt like he was such a rich main character, and I felt like he really helps you to become absorbed in the world of Gaia. I'll next go over Vivi, who is a young black mage with immense magical powers. Vivi is technically our tritagonist. Vivi's on the younger side of the characters in the game. I mean, he literally has the height of a 9-year-old, but some of the events in the game make me think he's considerably younger. I'll avoid going to spoiler territory in case you've not played this game before, but I think he could be the youngest character in any Final Fantasy game. Vivi is quite vocal about his fears, often coming across as troubled, but develops quite well and grows in his expression and comfort as he works alongside the team. I should actually loop back around to our deuteragonist Garnet. She's the Princess of Alexandria, although when we play as her, we learn that she's a white mage who has the ability to summon Eidolons, which are incredibly powerful guardians. I guess creatures could be a better descriptor, but past that, Garnet is an incredibly complex character. Her experiences and character development are essential to the story of the game and becomes a character you really feel attached to and epitomizes the resilience of the world fighting for its freedom and each other. Steiner, the captain of the Knights of Pluto, kind of seems like a comedic relief character at the start, your typical brawny, impulsive and reactive character with an incredibly narrow-minded view of things, swearing complete loyalty to Garnet's mother, Queen Bran. He actually develops so much throughout the game, particularly past the mid-game. I really enjoyed his character development as I think it perfectly worked alongside the direction the story heads in and gives us more insight into his more vulnerable side. Partway through the game we meet Freya, who's a rat, more specifically a very skilled and strong dragon warrior. She seems to know Zidane from before the events of the game, and her story is more of a tragic one compared to most of the other characters in the game, which I really appreciated. While I didn't personally play with her much, I really enjoyed her inclusion as a more hopeful, patient and lenient character. Quina, where do I even start with this character? Quina is definitely our comedic relief character who is only looking for yummies. And by yummies, I largely mean frogs. There were several times throughout the game where I was either laughing or I was just perplexed by Quina and how they just go about things or are completely unscathed. Quina is surprisingly one of the stronger characters in the game if utilised correctly. Later on we meet Aiko, who like Vivi is incredibly young. I think she's 6, and like Garnet she can also summon Eidolons. She's quite a fun character, not one designed to be a comedic relief character like Quina, but her youthful nature, innocence and I guess the sole ability to be able to completely transparent about Zidane and Garnet's dynamic makes her appearance really enjoyable, although it's much to her own dismay considering she has a crush on Zidane, which I thought was a really fun way to break the heavy nature of some parts of the game. Shortly after meeting and working with Aiko, we encounter someone seen earlier in the game. He's called Amaran, and well, he rounds out our party. Amaran is very standoffish and nonchalant, often questioning how he ended up with the group and challenging Zidane to determine whether he was right to join the party. He's quite arrogant, largely to protect his honor as a warrior. You could also say he's quite naive until late into the game, and unfortunately he's probably the least expanded upon playable character, which is a little bit of a shame because I thought his inclusion was really cool. The main antagonist situation is really interesting. It throws it around so much from the early to mid game that you kind of don't know for certain who the actual main antagonist is. It's so well done, and it kind of keeps you suspicious of everyone and everything, and when you eventually learn who the main antagonist is, you piece together just how extensive their inclusion is from the very beginning of the game, which I thought was excellent, and our final interactions with them was honestly incredible. The story was very interesting. It rotates between groups throughout the story, experiencing their own separate struggles and growth. I thought it was incredibly engaging and emotional. It was actually one of the few games that left me crying. Oh my god, it's so good. The depth and intensity of the story just becomes overwhelming quickly, and you can't help but play through it because you feel like you're part of it as well. It's not rushed at all, there aren't any overwhelming expositions, the pacing of the story is great and is slowly built upon as you move around the world of Gaia and learn more about these other areas and cultures, and I felt like it's just blended perfectly. Looking at the themes present in the story, there's obviously deep fantasy themes, with magic being at the forefront, along with massively rich and diverse cultures. The royalty is complex, it explores political fallout, war, and the weight of being a leader. The magic actually feels magical, which in itself is a weird statement to say, but I played so many games where it tries to have the magic be at the forefront but fell flat, and this game deals with magic perfectly, to be honest. Eidolons feel powerful and discovering them feels rewarding. Seeing their cutscenes for the first time was so cool. They're also themed of the unknown, you won't understand everything immediately, and the game works wonderfully to make that experience interesting and impactful, along with the determination to discover the truth, which is highlighted through major plot twists that were very well executed and surprising. The action sequences and cutscenes felt pretty good. I felt they were quite ahead of their time considering the complexity of the movements and camera work. They were actually quite good at expanding the story. Having these small sequences that you could watch at the end of a fight, for example, felt rewarding and worked excellently to be blended with the gameplay loop. Before I talk about the turn-based gameplay, I wanted to look at the trance feature, which the game explains to be overwhelming emotions from the character that are built up over time. In fights, it allows for more damaging skills to be performed by the character, which I thought was really neat. It worked in a similar way to Final Fantasy VII's Limit Break, but I felt it was more expansive here, as it's blended better into the wide nature of the turn-based gameplay instead of just being a single attack and that's it. Speaking of the turn-based combat, it can be set to either active or wait. For this playthrough, it's with wait, just because that's what I think most people are familiar with. I thought the option for changing the ACB system was quite neat and allows for the experience to be better tailored to the player. So for those who want a harder challenge, they can set it to active, and for those who are maybe newer to it can keep it on wait. In terms of customization, gear can be found throughout the world or bought in shops, with gear having skills and abilities imbued into the actual gear. To unlock the abilities and skills, you need to get a certain amount of AP. Once done, the skill is unlocked for you to access in the abilities tab and allows you to more freely rotate between gear. It's a more simple way to acquire skills than the sphere grid in Final Fantasy X, but I thought it was equally as complex as the materia system in Final Fantasy VII, at least to me. I think the balancing for both is what makes them equally complex, because they're both relatively easy to understand from a mechanical standpoint. I thought the Synergist was a really unique way to customize your gear. It requires you to have two separate items available for combination to create a new item. These items could also be found throughout the world, but sometimes it would allow for quicker progression of damage and skills, which was really appreciated. There is a lot of side content in this game. Firstly, the card game Tetramaster was incredibly fun, thankfully simple enough for someone like me to understand and quite accessible. Cards can be bought or collected from fights you complete throughout the game. There are also frogs to catch if you have Queen in your party. This was a nice little break from all of the action and has some pretty good rewards, and also some challenge at the end once you collected 99 frogs. The Chocobo side quests were incredibly fun, so fun in fact that I forgot to record most of it and spent like 6 hours just playing the minigame and collecting the Chocographs. These are essentially treasure hunts which work in tandem with your Chocobo being improved to traverse more terrains, which also has its own story, which is very fun. These treasure hunts actually had really good rewards, and the Chocobo can even find you some ultimate weapons, so it's definitely worth doing. The game also features an auction house where you can bid to get items, although it does become quite expensive if you're competitive. The enemies did drop quite a bit of gil, so it worked out quite well, and you could always sell older gear that you didn't use for synergizing once you had acquired the skills and abilities. I'm not even covering all the side content here because there's quite a bit more, but I thought it all worked excellently to further build a more immersive and engaging world. Early on, I don't think there's too much challenge, especially if you're familiar with turn-based games and older JRPGs in general. For the most part, if you're attentive to the mechanics and take the time to upgrade your characters, then most of the game is relatively simple. I do think the challenge increases proportionally towards the end as we reach our strongest. I thought this was excellent as it allows it to be a representation of the team's collective and individual strength and the desperation of the antagonist. I do have to mention it here, but the environmental design was incredible. The pre-rendered backgrounds were visually beautiful and perfectly encapsulated the fantasy theme and allowed the culture of each area to be fully displayed. I tried to think of any standout areas that I could show here, but when I was going back through my footage, I just thought I couldn't put any one area above another. They're all just so beautifully designed. Looking at other visual designs, the 3D models are complex, cutscenes are beautiful, and there's so much diversity in NPC and playable character design. The audio mix was quite good. It does sound a little harsh, particularly with louder sounds. The music as always is fantastic, but if you know Final Fantasy, then you know it won't ever disappoint. There isn't any outright voice acting, so I can't really give my thoughts on it, although there are a few occasions where you could hear singing, so if I was to assess it, then I'd say it's really good. It didn't sound harsh or rough at all, and it worked quite well with the moments it was used in. There are also sounds in the cutscenes, which I really appreciated. It helped the sequences feel more real and more immersive. The game took about 38 hours to complete for my first playthrough, and about 23 to 25 hours to complete the main story. I spent the rest of the time either grinding or working through side content. Although I tackled quite a fair bit of the side content, there's still much that I need to do, which goes to show the extent of the quality of the game. I listed quite a bit of the side content earlier and still managed to miss quite a few things. A few other things I think the game does really well is the active time events. This allows the game to tell multiple stories at once, which I thought was good for world building as it avoids expositions. Exploring the world felt good. It took me a moment to adjust to it, but once I did, I thought it was great. There's quite a lot of vertical environments in the open world, which I thought highlighted the increase in game design and improvement, especially after playing Chrono Trigger earlier this year, which if you haven't already, consider checking out that review. As much as the bulk of this video has just been me endlessly praising the game, because it is just that good, I do have some very small issues with it, and it's largely just the louder sounds. They seem to be a little harsh and also just being a bit too loud in general. Like my volume was almost on mute and it was still somehow quite loud, so if you don't mind louder games then this won't be an issue, but I prefer not to get headaches. Also, the performance was fine for the most part, but stuttered quite a bit and I'm not sure why. The game isn't graphically demanding or even requires the latest hardware, so my assumption is that it's an issue with the port. So, probably the easiest question of the day, would I recommend? Absolutely, it easily falls into my top 3 Final Fantasy games. It's just such an incredible game. Oh my god, it could still be due to me just finishing the game, so all the emotions are still there, but I can genuinely find very few things to fault with this game. I can fully understand why there's so much anticipation about this game being the next remake project, although I think if it was to be done, it has to be a true remake. I don't think there's much from a narrative standpoint that could even be changed. I think it would also be best if it was just one big game instead of being drawn out over 3 games like the Final Fantasy VII Remake project. And well, that's pretty much all I've got for this review. I think the game is just a masterpiece and holds up very well. If you have the opportunity to play this game, I would absolutely recommend playing it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Consider liking the video if you haven't already. Maybe if you've got some spare time, consider checking out one of my other reviews, even if it's just another Final Fantasy review. I hope you all have a good day and I'll see you around.